Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Wendy Leshgold, who's here to share with us her new book, Fast Forward: 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. So are you tired of the way things have been and you're ready to make a change? Well, today's show is just for you. So Wendy Leshgold is the president and co-founder of the Fast Forward Group, a professional development and executive coaching company. Wendy spent more than a decade in advertising, leading some of the top teams, and working with brands including Apple, Kodak, and IBM. She experienced firsthand the challenges people face in high-pressure corporate environments. Feeling compelled to help, she launched a successful executive coaching practice. A decade later, she joined forces with her childhood friend, Lisa McCarthy, who shares her passion. So let's welcome to the show, Wendy Leshgold.
Thank you, Marianne. It's nice to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, that is a very good question. So my co-founder and partner, Lisa McCarthy, and I started our company, the Fast Forward Group, about 11 years ago. And during that time, we have been fortunate to be able to work with top leaders at some of the world's most successful companies like Amazon and Google and JP Morgan Chase and Visa and TikTok. And we've shared our system, if you will, I like that word, system, with probably over 100,000 leaders around the globe. And it's been rewarding to see the impact it's had on so many people. And yet we knew that there were so many people that we'd never get to work with that would, really benefit from our work and our tools and the principles that we share. So we wrote the book to be able to share that whole proven system with everyone else who's never going to get to be in a workshop with us, and also to provide a kind of something to come back to for the graduates of our program so that they could, kind of have it as a reminder and a touchstone of what they learned.
Well, I think that's all important pieces. And I like how you just start off right off the bat talking about Avery. And I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yes, Avery, which obviously the names are all changed, but the stories are true. So Avery was a leader that we were working with her whole team, and I was her executive coach. And when I met her, she had just had a baby. She was living in New York City. She had a big job, and she just was, I would say, underwater is a good word. Frazzled is probably a good word. If she always kind of appeared to be out over her skis and not happy about it. And one of the things I mentioned in this story is that when we were trying to get set up to do the coaching together, it was just hard to even get on the calendar with her because she just was that much sort of backlogged in her schedule and her calendar, and everything was just, chaos. And when I first met her and I asked her to tell me about her life, it was, just frustration after frustration as to like what it was like to be a young mother, to have a big job, to have all the responsibilities of travel and working, and then her marriage and trying to maintain, a semblance of a routine and spend time with her new baby. And all of it just was showing up as so impossible and hard. And she felt so hopeless, I guess, if you will, about how am I going to ever be able to be successful at work, but also not feel like I'm sacrificing at home and do all the things that she had lots of ambitions and wanted to be able to accomplish a lot professionally. So we started with where we always start in Fast Forward in our coaching and in our programs, which is by asking her a very simple question, which was, what would you like it to look like a year from today? What would success look like, even if you don't know how to get there? And that is where we began, was by thinking about that question and having her really define that. And she did. And she at first said, well, I don't even know the point of articulating this because I don't know how it's going to happen. And, one of the things that we always tell people is that the first step is articulating what the future could look like in language, putting words around it, saying them out loud, writing them down as if they've already happened. And that's the first step. It's obviously not all the steps, but it is the first step, is believing something could be different in the future than it's been in the present and in the past. So that's where we began with Avery. And then what unfolded was a really successful journey for her in figuring out little by little steps she could take to have her life look different and have it look the way she wanted it to look, be the leader she wanted to be the kind of mother she wanted to be, have her day-to-day life feel more tenable. And she took piece by piece and brick by brick, she made that happen. And a year after we started working with her, her life was really almost unrecognizable. She had taken another role within her organization that worked better for her, that had a little bit less travel. She had set some processes up at home that were much more manageable, made her life better, gotten some help, and just little by little really, changed her life.
I think that's such an important question that you asked her initially, because how many of us can even see beyond what's happening within our little area? I guess it's like can't see the forest from the trees.
Yeah, I don't think it's really hard to see beyond, and I think how it feels for many of us is, we wake up on Monday morning and, we have this huge to-do list, probably most of it left over from what we didn't get done last week, despite our best efforts. And then we're attacking the to-do list versus really thinking about what are the big bets that what I would love to and feel so proud to accomplish in the next year. And then organizing your time around that. And not to say that it'll be perfect, but usually when people put more intention around them, they take way more ground than they would have if they hadn't done that.
I think so many people feel that way too, where they feel like they're just in this kind of repetition of working so hard, staying so busy, but not really getting anywhere.
Yeah, it can be really frustrating. And I think especially for those of us, and I know, in our story about Avery, she felt this way because I remember one of the things I did with her is we did this 360 review and, basically getting feedback from all of her team, her manager, some of her peers. And Avery was, in addition to obviously being a super dedicated wife and mother, she was a really ambitious professional and really had a high bar for herself on the kind of work she wanted to do. And when she got this feedback, while she was a beloved leader, people loved her, there was a lot of stuff in there that was hard for her to hear about showing up seeming frazzled, not seeming calm, always seeming too busy, always seeming rushed. And it made her feel so frustrated because it really wasn't how she wanted to show up. And yet she didn't know any other way. And so we had to kind of start from, okay, if this is how it is today, like let's put that aside and really think about how do you want to be showing up? How do you want people to see you? And then what would that take? What's one thing that you could do every day or every week that would get you closer to being known that way? And then what's another thing? And then what's another thing? And it is just through that she made so many changes that were so meaningful.
What's one of the number one things people come to see you at the Fast Forward group?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, we work with teams, we work with a lot of managers, and most of them are challenged by, there's really two things that they're challenged by. One of them is most workplaces that, I don't know, in today's world, given technology and how we work, they're, always on. People are always on. So there's messaging and communication coming at people 24/7. And the pace is intense. Usually the pressure is intense. Most companies have ambitious goals. And in the face of those types of environments, people can either risk feeling burned out, not able to sustain a certain pace. So that's one of the things that we help people address. And then the other thing is oftentimes in the face of that kind of pressure and pace, people tend to be like a little risk averse. And that's a very human thing. There's nothing, if there's been so much work and studies done on how we as human beings relate to risk. And one of the scientists that we've studied is a man named Daniel Kahneman. He's written several books. He won a Nobel Prize for the work that he did studying risk aversion. And he found that people will do more to avoid failure than they will to achieve an equal gain, which is really very counterintuitive, because you would think, no, you do more to get $100 than you would to, avoid losing $100. And yet that's just how we're wired. Probably goes back to evolutionary times when, we had to protect ourselves from dangers and just struggle to survive. But that kind of risk aversion, while it might keep us safe, it definitely doesn't help us thrive in the workplace, and even in our personal lives, it doesn't. So one of the things we help teams and people do is think bigger, see more possibilities for the future, and be willing to go for them despite some chance of failure. And at the same time, really protect themselves from being burnt out, finding a way to achieve a success professionally, be able to go after ambitions that are important, but also not put important things in your personal life on hold for just, some mythical time in the future when you think you might have more time to address them. Things like health, marriage, children, relationships, all of that good stuff.
There's a quote in your book that really stuck with me, and it's, next year is not going to be any better unless you choose to make it better. And I was going, oh my goodness, I could feel that. I'm sure a lot of leaders right now are going, ooh, okay, so I need to change the status quo.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable. Let's just acknowledge that, for all of us, we would rather, we would rather set predictable, safe goals that we know how to achieve. I mean, think about it. Like, that feels way more comfortable. It doesn't feel comfortable to go for things that we don't know how to accomplish. And we have this expression that we use a lot that we stole from an Irish writer named Frank O'Connor. And he talked about throwing your hat over the wall so you have no choice but to follow it. And we love that expression. It came from, his childhood, when he and his friends used to go on these walks, and they would come upon these walls in orchards that they couldn't get over. And they would take their hats off their head from their school uniform and just toss them over the wall. So they would have to figure out how to get over. And it's such an apt metaphor for goal setting and creating intentions for the future. Because if you're willing to go for things without knowing how, your brain can then all of a sudden, instead of your brain being focused on all the reasons why you can't get over the wall, what your brain then starts to do is figure out how to get over. And they call that creative tension. And that's like a known scientific thing that happens in our brain. So when we throw our hats over the wall, whether it's, to get a promotion, or to, even something personal like running a marathon, or moving to a new city, or buying a house, or just doing something we've never done before. Maybe it's learning a new language, or taking on a new project that feels really scary, or taking on a new role in our community. It feels super uncomfortable. We don't know how we're going to get over the wall. And yet once we declare it, once we write it down and then tell people, we're way more likely to make it happen. And there's research on that too. So for example, when you write down your goals, the research shows you're 42% more likely to accomplish them. And then when you tell someone, especially if you tell somebody who can help you and hold you accountable, then you're twice as likely to make it happen. So it feels uncomfortable, and yet there's huge value in putting ourselves out there in that way.
You often hear of like New Year's resolutions where people write down what they wish for the new year. And it seems that science is really kind of showing that there's benefit and value to that.
Yes. The only thing I would say that's different about this versus a New Year's resolution is a lot of times we give people certain tips on how to write this down. We have a whole exercise with 7 questions that help people to articulate a very 360-degree view of what the future could look like in a year, distinct from the past. And one of the things we tell people not to do is we say, first of all, write it as if it's already happened or is still happening, versus saying, oh, I want to be a better mother. I want to be a better manager. Right. So that's, first of all, that is non-specific. And second of all, it's written as an aspiration versus, okay, imagine, literally fast forward to a year from today. Right. So imagine that it is October, or December of 2024. And imagine what you'd love your life to look like in certain, ways. And that's what the 7 different questions are. And then write it as if it already looks that way. So that there's a big mental shift that happens when you write it that way. And then write why it's important to you versus just having it be a laundry list of goals. Because when you write why it matters and what difference it would make, that will motivate you on the days when you just don't feel like getting out of bed, or you just want to, go sit and watch Netflix versus get out in your life and do stuff. Because that we all have those days. So that's one of the big differences. The other thing too is oftentimes I see New Year's resolutions where people say, I'm not going to eat sweets. I'm not going to oversleep my alarm clock, or I'm not going to be unkind to people. And we say, instead of saying what you're not going to do, say what you are going to do, because it has a different impact on how you feel about it. And and it can be more specific in terms of what you actually are going to do.
I love that. I think that that's so empowering. I'd love for you to share. I know your book's based on 5 power principles, and I'd love for you to share those with our listeners.
Yeah. So the first power principle you and I have been talking about over these last few minutes, it is the foundation of our work because it creates a blueprint for people to follow as the year goes by. And that is declare a bold vision and share it. And those last 3 words are really important because a lot of times we keep our aspirations to ourselves. And in this power principle, we not only help guide people through how to write their bold vision, but we also give them a lot of guidance on how to share it with other people who are key stakeholders in our life, if you will. And that could be your manager, your team, your significant other people who are important that are going to be there to support you, cheer you on, and hold you accountable. So that's power principle number 1, and it's the first one. The second one, we get into mindset, because when you think about what are the things that derail you, and we all have, things as we think about what gets in our way. Why is it that these things haven't happened already? A lot of times it has to do with what's going on in our head versus what's going on out there. So the second power principle, the language is choose a new perspective. And we really go deep on what are the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives, about relationships that we have, about circumstances in our life, about ourselves, and what are the costs of those stories. And really we give people a framework to, number 1, challenge them. Are they really true? Are they rooted in fact? Or are they in fact one possible perspective that perhaps we have a lot of evidence for? And then we give people a framework to help them to brainstorm other possible perspectives. And then we show them how to choose a new one and then what to do once you've chosen it. And it's really, really powerful. It's been so game changing for so many people to use this framework to be able to shift their mindset and really challenge stories that may have been plaguing them for years. So that's power principle number 2. And I love that one. We sometimes call it the money principle because it is so potent. Power principle 3 is plan the work and work the plan. And that one is really where the rubber meets the road, because without a plan, people are lost in the woods without a compass, right? Just sort of you're busy with your to-do list, just checking things off the list. But we give people a very prescriptive planning tool that helps them to work backwards from the outcomes versus just making a list of things to do. Right? Because so many of us, we're just trying to get stuff done. because we have to get through our day and, have dinner at the end of the day, see our loved ones, and get to bed at a reasonable hour. But having a plan that starts with the outcome and then works backwards is a much faster road to producing results. And so we show people how to do that. Super powerful principle. And then the last two power principles are all around communication. And number 4 is use language of action. We talk all about distinctions around how we speak and using powerful language. And then the last one is all about listening. And it's called Stop Talking and Get Curious. And we give people coaching on how to listen, how to generate curiosity, and how that can make such an extraordinary difference in relationships, trust, and just moving things forward in our relationships and in groups.
I found this book to be such a powerful book. It really kind of takes people to the next level within their business. One of the things you talk about in your second principle is what's the cost of being right? And I think a lot of times managers are maybe there's a little bit of a power struggle going on, that it's more important for them to be right than to be successful.
Yeah. And it's everybody. We all do this. And I'm going to give you like the perfect example of this, just so people are like, well, what do you mean being right versus being happy or being successful? And, a lot of times and I'll give you a professional example. So sometimes, you work at a company and everyone on the team has this narrative about one of the clients. So let's say you work for a company that is in a service industry and you have clients that you have to work with, and you need those clients in order to be successful. And everyone on the team says that client is a jerk. They don't appreciate us. They set unrealistic deadlines. They are rude. They're disrespectful. They don't understand the value we bring to the table. Yada, 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 right? I'm sure everyone has seen this movie where everyone is collecting evidence for this negative story about this client. And everyone feels really right about it because they have so much evidence, right? And collecting evidence is another thing that's so rooted in brain science. This is confirmation bias, right? And I think everybody's these days is familiar with that term, but it's like we collect evidence for things we already believe to be true. And then we glom on, and the more evidence we collect, the truer it feels. And the less possible it is for anything else to emerge as a possible perspective. So what we always say to people is the first step is figuring out what's the cost. What's the cost, even though you feel so right? And in the case of this example with the client, Marianne, you could probably guess it. Like, tell me, what do you think the cost would be in that situation?
I don't think you can measure it.
Yeah, it's like business results, relationship with a client, culture, the team feeling motivated and engaged. It has such a high cost, and yet the client over there is they're fine. They're not suffering. The people suffering in the story are the ones who have it, which is so, crazy. So in the exercise that we give, we kind of help guide people through, okay, well, if that's the cost, what are other stories about the client that you could potentially choose, even if they don't feel authentic when you first say them because you don't have evidence for them? What is another way of looking at that situation? And then if you took on another perspective, like let's say you said, okay, the new perspective is our team and this client have the same goals. If you took on that perspective, what would be different, right? Looking through that new lens, what would you do differently? How would you feel? How would you communicate? And I think people see new things in a new perspective that they never would have seen looking through the old lens of that client is an idiot who doesn't appreciate us. So we give people a lot of examples of this in the book, personal examples and professional, and then give them, a way to sort of practice doing this on their own so they could use it in their own life.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Wendy Leshgold in regards to her new book, Fast Forward: 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. We'll be right back after these messages.
Are you an actor, public speaker, or an executive telling your story over Zoom? Jean-Louis Rodrigue and Scott Weintraub's new book, Back to the Body, takes the process they use to coach top Hollywood talent like Margot Robbie, Jack Black, and Ke Huy Quan and makes it available to everyone. Using your body and its energy as a point of departure, your work will gain an enhanced level of performance and depth. Back to the Body, available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Every day, pets are surrendered and abandoned. For these helpless and hurting animals, Paws Humane Society acts as a voice for the voiceless, providing hope for a brighter future. You can make a difference in the life of a shelter pet. Become a humane hero today. Just $10 a month will provide much-needed food, shelter, medical care, and love. It takes a community. It takes heroes like you. Together we can. Together we will. Together, we are Paws Humane. Visit pawshumane.org to be a hero in every animal story.
What if everything we think we know about addiction, depression, anxiety, and trauma is missing the one key element that will actually let you walk away from them for good? My name's Bob Gardner, founder of The Freedom Specialist and creator of a body-based approach that eliminates suffering and creates happiness, health, and well-being on autopilot. You can read all about it in my book, Built for Freedom, or start your own adventure toward lasting freedom at thefreedomspecialist.com.
If you want to stop divorce fast, you do not need to waste years in therapy. You do not need to work on yourself, and you do not even have to have your spouse on board. If your spouse wants out, if they're filing for divorce, separation, or having an affair, what you need is a proven process to turn your marriage around. Book a free breakthrough session with us at highthrivecoaching.com/apply.
Dr. Richard London, who has 25 years of experience being known as the Man of Steel with the Heart of Velvet, presents the Life Wellness System, The Road to Yes, a mentoring system that brings you to becoming a wellness heir. Imagine having wealth, wellness, love, peace, and spirituality in abundance and balance now. Visit doctorateoflife.com or call 720-213-8021 for a free 15-minute wellness evaluation.
Hi, this is Jana Wilson, author of Wise Little One, Learning to Love and Listen to My Inner Child, a best-selling prescriptive memoir in inner child healing. I'm also the founder of the Emotional Healing System. The inner child, simply put, is your feelings, both positive and negative. If you'd like to learn to love and listen to your wise little one, pick up my book at Amazon or visit my website at janawilson.com. It's never too late to have a happy childhood.
The first thing you need to know about me is that I love my kids, but they are not my everything. They used to be, but that's when my entire life fell apart. In order to pick back up the pieces, I had to put the love I have for myself before everything else, including my kids. I'm Jessica Dennehy, and I own multiple businesses. I'm a best-selling author, and I have all the strategies that I've used to make my life what it is today. And I'm going to teach you how to do them in my new book, Selfish is a Superpower. So go get your copy today on Barnes & Noble or jessicadennehy.com.
Announcing a revolutionary tool for wellness. Scalar Light has the ability to enhance and harmonize your own bioenergies. With Scalar Light, you can get started in just minutes and begin feeling better the very next day. Scalar Light is a remote energy that gently and subtly works with your own body's bioenergies, increases pro-cellular wellness, and enhances your body's immunity.
Experience the benefits of Scalar Light. Try a complimentary 15-day experience at scalarlight.com.
In your hands lie ancestral patterns. These patterns shape how you think, what you struggle with, and experiences you love, your life pattern. We're going into the latest neuroscience of biological hand analysis, a realm beyond palmistry where science and the soul entwine. Hand analysis is the latest method to transform lifelong patterns. I am Master Hand Analyst Brent Bruning. Join us and visit thepowerinyourhands.com.
Pandemonium. Fast forward 20 years. A U.S. president seizes control of all U.S. missiles, the power grid, the banking system, and every computer in America as he hides in an underground bunker. Pandemonium, a captivating sci-fi thriller where a hidden war, psychics, aliens, artificial intelligence, and transcendental love collide with the latest media technology. Pandemonium, live to all devices. Get your copy on paperback or digital. Free sample at getpsychic.org.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Wendy Leshgold, and she's here sharing with us her new book, Fast Forward: 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. Do people tend to reach this kind of aha moment when they realize they can choose a new perspective?
I think yes. The answer is absolutely yes. And different people have the aha at different moments in time. Usually at the beginning, people just feel like, well, I'll play along with this exercise, but my client really is a jerk. Like, I don't think that's changing. But then by the time they go through the process of how we guide people through it, they find themselves saying, maybe there is another perspective I could choose that would be less disempowering and toxic. Maybe there is. And then if they're willing to put on another pair of glasses and look through another lens, it's just game changing.
Well, what if their terrible client is actually themselves? How do they deal with that inner critic that they have?
Oh, Marianne, such a great question. Yeah, because oftentimes the worst stories we tell are the ones we tell about ourselves. And it could be, I'm not an inspiring leader. I'm not as smart as people here, things like that. And we handle those stories in the same way you'd handle a story about another person, which is really like, what is the cost of that story? So if you're saying, I'm not an inspiring leader, and that is the story that you're telling yourself, and you're looking for evidence of that in your leadership and in your life, number one, you're going to find the evidence, because if that's the story you're looking to fuel, you'll find evidence for it, and it will continue to fuel it and just, take its toll on you, making you feel not confident, feeling disempowered, feeling less effective, feeling like you can't be authentic and yourself with the people that are around you. So it has an extremely high cost to believe something like that about yourself. And so the first thing we would ask people is, okay, even though you might not be feeling it in the current moment, what is another story you could say about yourself and your leadership? What is one other possible perspective? And then we literally have people brainstorm this, and we have this this wheel that we have, and it's in the book, and we have a companion workbook that people can download when they buy the book, and they fill out wedges in the wheel. We suggest they do it with a friend, with all the other possible perspectives they could potentially choose. And then we say, okay, once you've filled out the whole wheel, pick one that maybe resonates with you the most. So maybe it's, I am a caring, competent leader. And then look for evidence of that. Spend your time fueling that story versus, I'm not an inspiring leader. And look through that lens and those glasses and see what you find there. And that often has a outsized impact on people's confidence, their impact, and just how they feel about themselves.
There seems to be a great deal of busyness that happens that doesn't allow us to really take control of our time or be in control of what it is that we're trying to do on a daily basis. What are some of the things that you see that get people stuck?
Well, I mean, the number one thing is and we since we've been on this topic of stories, is the story about time that many people have, which is there aren't enough hours in the day. I just don't have enough time. And like any story, that one it's not rooted in fact, because everyone has the same amount of time, right? We all have 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week, and 365 days in a year. And, we can tell ourselves we don't have enough time, but, I think there's a very steep cost to that, because it makes you just feel really defeated about your day-to-day life. And so we often will coach people to consider that you have exactly enough time for the things that really matter to you, which doesn't mean that you have enough time to do everything. And it does require you to take a long, hard look at, well, what is important to me and what will I need to say no to? And we do spend there's some real estate in our book on how do you say no? How do you figure out what to say no about? And then how do you actually do it? Because that is such a valuable skill that I think many people feel uncomfortable with.
No, that's a big one. That is a big one. And so how do people get to this place where they're like, okay, no, I'm not going to overbook my schedule or get to this place where things seem like they're out of control? How do they work that?
Yeah. Well, the first step is figuring out, well, what are the things that are most important to me? And I'm going to just give you a very small tactical example so that this, just to bring it to life, is, so for example, when I started my company, I had 3 kids that were young. My oldest was, I think, 11 or 12, and then the other two were younger. So I was, in that phase of my life where they were all with their various, activities and schools and things that they were doing. And I was starting a business. I was traveling around the world. And, there was a lot on my plate. And so I sat down, I one of my commitments is being known as a present, loving mother, right? That is something that, continues to be, and what has always been, extremely important to me. Despite starting a business, that was a priority to me. So I sat down with my family and I talked to them a little bit about, well, what are the things that are really important for me to show up at and do? And then what are the things that are, you don't really care about so much? And even my son, who at the time was like 7, was vocal and participatory in that conversation. And we realized that, okay, if you're performing in a play, like that was really important. My daughters were both in these plays. Like, it was important to come to the plays, but it was less important to go to the field trips. It was really, so certain things were really important. Certain things were not as important. My son said, I really like it when you come to my baseball games, but I don't really care if you're not signing up to be the mom who comes and mans the salad bar in the cafeteria. So it was really, really helpful to eliminate the things that were not a priority and really only organize myself around the things that were important. So it's a small tactical example, but it helped so much. It gave me so much peace. I mean, there were times when I literally flew across the world to get home for a student performance, but had peace around the times when I missed a field trip or, wasn't signing up to be the class mom, which was less important. So I think I don't know if that answers your question. I think you could apply that same lens with any area of your life.
I think a lot of times we just get so overwhelmed, like we should be doing everything without looking at other people's perspective and getting their participation in what's important.
For sure. And I think, the example I gave was a personal one, and it was, with my family. But I think when you're talking about professional priorities and really getting clarity and alignment with the people around you on what those are and what they're not, one of the reasons our vision exercise is so powerful is that we tell people that one of the key people to share it with is their manager, because you want to make sure you're aligned with your manager on what your big bets are professionally. Now, some people may not choose to read every single line of their vision with their manager. It really depends on the kind of relationship you have. I always say share as much as you possibly are willing to share, because getting connected as human beings is so valuable. But at the very least, you're sharing, okay, this is what success looks like for me in my role and at this organization. And your manager may listen to it and say, I'm going to support you in X, Y, and Z, but I would also encourage you to consider this other thing, which I also think is really important for you. Or this one thing that you said is really important. I don't really see that as a priority. But those types of conversations help you get clarity on what to say yes to and what to say no to, which is really going to help with this whole struggle around time that I think is so ever pervasive for most of us in these crazy days.
So, what are some of the pitfalls that we should really be aware of as we are making changes?
Pitfalls. Well, I mean, everybody falls off the wagon in certain ways, and I'll give you, and I think that the pitfall would be staying off track, just giving up and throwing up your hands and saying, "Forget it." The key play there is get back on track. Notice that you went off the track and come back on the track. I mean, this happens to me all the time. One of the things I am working on is being more intentional about my addiction to my phone. And I've created certain guardrails at home and certain guardrails at work to help me to be more intentional about my phone addiction, because I know that when I don't follow those, I pay the price in my relationships. I feel super stressed out. I don't feel as connected to people because I'm multitasking. I'm sure nobody else can relate to this. I'm sure it's only me. Haha. But I'll do great for a period of time, and then train goes off the track. The key is to notice that it got off the track, to ask people in your life to hold you accountable and tell you, "Hey, Wendy, I know you're working on this and you don't want to be looking at your phone while I'm talking to you, but I'm just going to tell you you're doing it right now." And, my response to that is, "Thank you so much for holding me accountable. I'm going to reset and get back on track," and not being defensive about it and not beating myself up about it, but just get back on the field, keep playing. So to me, that's the biggest pitfall, is just, having a breakdown about something or just getting off track and then beating yourself up, or getting defensive or beating other people up and then not getting back on track.
In your book, you share about being intentional is how you become effective. And I'd love for you to expand on that for our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key there is understand what it means to be intentional is to understand what it means to be reactive. Okay, that's the first step, is saying to yourself, and in our workshop, we say to people, okay, first we say to them, imagine, we even ask them to close their eyes, and we say, okay, imagine places in your life where things are really working, where you feel in control, where you feel like you're not, like you're kind of always sort of out in front of it, where you have peace and you feel confident. And we ask people, okay, write down a couple of those examples. And it could be for some, and it's different for everybody. So some people it might be, I'm really intentional about exercise. I always do it. I count on myself to do it. I have a routine. I feel really great about it. It could be, I'm really great about doing my team meeting. It's super intentional. I always have an agenda. I always show up on time. People know what's expected of them. And then we ask people, okay, now close your eyes and imagine the places in your life where it doesn't feel like that, where you feel like you're forever on your back foot, where you feel like you're just on autopilot. You're always reacting. You might be complaining. It feels like frustrating and stressful. And then we ask them to think about, well, what are those areas? Now, for me, it's definitely my phone. I feel super reactive to my phone. For some people, it could be getting a good night's sleep. They feel super reactive every night. They go to bed too late. Or some people, I never wake up on time. Or it could be, I'm very reactive when my client calls me. I just am like autopilot how I respond. Or people put time on my calendar and I immediately reactively accept those invites, even if I know that I've had 8 back-to-back meetings in an 8-hour period during the day. So our coaching is to look at the cost of being reactive so that you can then create practices to shift from being reactive to intentional. Because at its heart, the whole thing about being intentional is about raising your consciousness about what you're doing so that it's not autopilot, so that it's not automatic behavior.
Yeah, and I find it interesting because a lot of times, and especially in your book, you talk about how we need to know our desired outcome.
Yeah.
And for some people that have a hard time with maybe having a vision of the future, how do they get to that place?
Yeah, I mean, the term desired outcome, I mean, different people have their definitions of this, but our definition of this term is at the end of a conversation, what do you want the other person or people to leave believing, thinking, and then by consequence, doing? So if you think about it, if a bold vision is really like fast forwarding a year and imagining what your whole life would look like in the future, in a year's time, a desired outcome is like a mini vision for a conversation. It's like zoom out to the end of the conversation, and what will have how has the other person's what is their mindset and what is their behavior as a result of the conversation. And we use that language because a lot of times when people go into conversations or meetings, they're not thinking about that. They're just thinking about what are all the things I need to talk about? What's my agenda of all the different things we're going to cover in this meeting versus, what do I actually want to have happen at the end of this? Like, what are the action the other person would maybe take? And what would they have to believe in order to take that action? How would it be beneficial to them? So it's just a very different way of thinking about your communication and planning for it.
What is the number one reason that leaders and corporations come to work with your company?
I think they're either at their heart, it's that they care about their people and they want to retain and engage the best talent. And in order to be able to have a culture where people feel like they can do their very best work, you have to help people to consistently over time be able to manage their time, manage their energy, get inspired by what success looks like for themselves in the future, and be able to have agency and take ownership over the things that will predictably get in the way of that. You can't leave it to chance. Okay, just they're going to be fine. If we hire really smart, great people, they'll be fine. And I think the world's top leaders know that's not the case. You got to invest in giving people a toolkit to help them to be the best version of themselves. And so I think why we're hired is because, unlike a lot of other people who are doing leadership training, we're looking at people as a whole person versus just, I'm going to tell you how to be a better leader. I'm going to tell you how to be a better manager. Everything that we give people in our book, in our workshops, it's really about your whole self and how to be the best version of yourself professionally. And everything is applicable to your personal life as well as your professional life, because we're whole people. We're not just, compartmentalized at work or at home. So that's been hugely valuable at many of the organizations that we've worked with.
One of the chapters I found very interesting, you talk about freeing ourselves from solving other people's problems. I know that's a habit probably for a lot of people. So why would we do that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the reason that people are constantly solving other people's problems, there's two major reasons. One is it's faster. It's faster than coaching and asking questions and listening. People get impatient, especially managers in the workplace. Just easier to just tell you what to do. That's the number one. And yet there's, a whole host of things wrong with that. But number two, the reason they don't do it is because they feel like because we want to be helpful, because we're good people. Most of us, we're just good people and we want to be helpful. And we think that if we just give people solutions, we're just going to help them. And yet, if we really look deep at who have been the best leaders or the best kind of coaches, if you will, in our own life, they didn't do that. They actually started with, well, what do you think? What could you try? What have you tried? What are you trying to make happen here? What's getting in the way? I mean, those kind of questions help people solve their own problems. And they may do it in a way that's better than the solution you would have given them. And it will make them feel more empowered and more capable of solving their own problems in the future. So it's a huge gift you can give people to listen in that kind of way. And yet it takes a lot of discipline and self-management, especially in the workplace. But even like for parents, think about how easy it is to just tell your children what to do versus asking them, well, what do you think you should do? How else have you thought about this issue that you're having? works for parents, works for managers. Super effective strategy there.
So when we do this, we're really empowering other people to be creative in their own life.
For sure. Creative, resourceful, helping people think things through. And the quality of how we listen has a direct impact on the quality of the other person's thinking. We sometimes take that for granted, but sometimes we're contributing and making a difference just by listening. And I've been coaching people for many, many years. And when I first started my coaching business, I remember feeling this enormous amount of pressure to help people. Like I had to have an impact. In every coaching session, I wanted to make sure that I was doing my very best to help people. And that pressure was pushing me to say too much, to offer too much. And I've learned over the years that sometimes the best thing I could do is to say nothing and listen more and ask maybe a few choice questions, but really just get out of the way for people to think for themselves.
I think that's such a big deal, especially when we look at being able to not get into this place where we're having to fix everything. Because you often hear people say, "Oh, I'm the chief problem solver at my work." I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a badge I would want to wear.
Yeah. I think about it like, Marianne, a good way to think about it is when you're thinking about your skills and your toolkits as a manager in this regard, you think of a pendulum. And all the way on one side of the pendulum is fixing and solving and giving advice prescriptively. And then all the way on the other side of the pendulum is just listening, asking questions, letting people show up. And I think we need to be able to do both. And we need to know when to employ which tool. Because sometimes people say to me, well, sometimes it's okay to give people prescriptive counsel and advice. And the truth is, yes, it is. But I think most of us as managers pivot to that too quickly. And building up the muscle of being able to let people think a little bit first. Maybe they could solve it on their own first. Maybe they're going to think of something better than our solution on their own, giving them a chance to show up in that way before we swoop in with the solution. So that's a way of thinking about it, because I don't want people to think, oh, you should never do that, because there are the times when it is the right thing to do, but just not always.
Are these principles something that can be used not just in the work life, but in our home life too?
Yes, for sure. For sure. And I think there's so much relevance, and there's people that we've worked with where, they've had breakthroughs at work, but they've had even bigger breakthroughs in their home life. And it could be that you're putting things in your vision that are personal, whether it's something about a relationship, a personal relationship in your life, maybe with a significant other. It could be that you have aspirations in your personal life that you've never put any kind of intention around, whether it's just even things like, I'm going to take 2 vacations a year and get really connected to my partner, my family. So just putting in your sights what you want your life to look like outside of work is hugely valuable. And then the other power principles can be used to help you to accomplish all those things. Choosing a new perspective and having the rigor of a 90-day action plan, and using these communication tools to have intentional conversations, and also to be able to listen in a way that drives connection and gets people on board. All of these things are so valuable in all areas of your life, all applicable.
Wendy, what would you like readers and our listeners to take away from your book, Fast Forward?
I think if nothing else, my hope would be that people will say to themselves, gosh, what would I love my life to look like a year from today? And if that's a question that you would love to put some rigor and intention around, do our bold vision exercise. It is such a game-changing exercise for anybody who's done it from anywhere. And so, if you do nothing else from listening to this and you say, oh, gosh, I'm going to put pen to paper, I'm going to think about what my vision is a year from today for my life, that would be a great thing to take away.
Well, Wendy, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
You're so welcome. It was a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you, Wendy. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Fast Forward. Fast Forward's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. Remember, support our indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.